The streets of ancient Rome were alive with sound. Merchants haggled in the markets, senators debated in marble halls, and soldiers marched through the city that claimed to rule the known world. But beneath the marble, beneath the cheers and the spectacle, another world existed, one of shadows, whispers, and secrets so dangerous they could topple an empire. And at the center of that hidden world was a spy. Before we dive into this forgotten story, tell me in the comments where in the world you'll be watching from and what time it is right now. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss another tale of history's hidden spies. Rome was more than a city. It was a machine of power, fed by conquest and held together by control. Its laws, its legions, and its wealth stretched across continents. But what truly kept Rome alive wasn't its armies or its marble temples. It was its secrets, the military blueprints, the coded alliances, the private ambitions of men who wore togas by day and sharpened daggers by night. The spy who would enter this world was not born Ramon. They were an outsider, a face in the crowd, a shadow slipping through alleys where senators and generals believed themselves untouchable. Their skill was not strength with a sword, but silence, the ability to vanish in plain sight, to listen when others whispered, and to gather what Rome thought could never be stolen. And one day they laid their hands on something so precious, so powerful, that its theft could bring the empire to its knees. A secret not written for the masses, not even for the legions, but for the rulers themselves. Rome's greatest secret. No one yet knew who they were, where they came from, or why they dared to challenge the might of the empire. But their actions would echo across centuries, proving that even the strongest walls could be broken not by force, but by a whisper. Rome was not ruled by marble, nor by steel, but by information. To command an empire that stretched from the misty forests of Britannia to the blazing sands of Egypt, Rome relied on a network of couriers, informants, and spies, a silent army that never marched in formation, yet controlled everything. The Senate chambers resounded with debate, but those debates were guided by whispers collected from the empire's farthest corners. When generals rode to war, they carried not just swords and shields, but intelligence reports written in coded ink, passed through the hands of men who risked their lives to deliver them. Rome's secrets were guarded like treasures, hidden in scrolls that only the highest-ranking officials could access. And yet, into this tightly woven web, one intruder slipped unnoticed. This spy was no ordinary thief. To survive in the shadow of Rome was to play a dangerous game. Information was power, and those who sought it were always one mistake away from execution in the Forum. But this spy was patient. They did not storm Rome's gates or bribe senators openly. Instead, they moved like smoke, invisible, untouchable, always listening. Rome's intelligence officials prided themselves on their vigilance. Every letter was read twice. Every courier was watched. Every suspected traitor was interrogated until their screams echoed through marble halls. But like all great powers, Rome suffered from arrogance. The empire believed its walls of secrecy were unbreakable, its codes indecipherable. That arrogance became Rome's greatest weakness. The spy exploited gaps no senator could imagine. A guard who was too drunk to notice a sealed door. A clerk who spoke too freely after wine. A servant who resented the senators he served and whispered what he overheard to anyone who paid attention. Each fragment of information was small, meaningless on its own. But like a mosaic, piece by piece, the spy assembled the full picture. One night, beneath the flicker of oil lamps, the spy made their move. Hidden in the archives, deep within Rome's administrative heart, lay the scrolls that mapped the empire's lifeblood. Not the laws, not the census lists, but the strategies. The secret roads only generals knew. The alliances were secured through blackmail. The weaknesses of Rome's enemies, and more importantly, of Rome itself. And on that night, Parchment rustled like the sound of fate. The spy laid hands on Rome's most guarded secret. It was not gold. It was not jewels. It was knowledge, the one thing even Rome could not afford to lose. What was it exactly? A strategy? A betrayal? A weakness so devastating it could collapse the empire if revealed? That remains the mystery, a secret lost to time, but one whose theft shook the very foundations of Rome. And from that moment, Rome was no longer invincible. The theft should have been impossible. Rome was not careless with its treasures, least of all the treasures written in ink. Gold could be replaced. Armies could be rebuilt. But a secret, once stolen, could not be recovered. When the spy left the archives that night, a shadow among shadows, Rome unknowingly crossed into an age of vulnerability it had never known before. At dawn, the city of marble stirred to life as usual. Bakers lit their ovens, senators prepared for debate, soldiers assembled at the forum. Yet, somewhere deep within the curia, an archivist discovered that a scroll was missing. Not just any scroll, the scroll. The document contained information so sensitive that only a handful of Rome's highest officials had ever laid eyes upon it. It was the empire's beating heart on parchment. The discovery triggered chaos. The Praetorian Guard was dispatched immediately. Every clerk, servant, and soldier who had been near the archives was interrogated. The punishment was brutal. Men whipped, women threatened, slaves executed, but no answer came. The scroll had vanished, as though stolen by the gods themselves. In the Senate, panic rippled like wildfire. Voices rose in fury. One senator accused another of treason. Another suggested an enemy state had infiltrated Rome itself. Paranoia swept the chamber. Could it have been Carthage reborn? The Parthians? A barbarian king plotting from beyond the Rhine? And yet, no one spoke the truth aloud. Rome's arrogance had betrayed Rome. The spy had not stolen any ordinary intelligence. That much was certain. Some historians believe it was the master list of Rome's secret roads and supply lines, information that made Roman armies unstoppable because they could move faster than any enemy could anticipate. Others argue it contained the identities of Rome's informants and double agents, the invisible web of men and women who betrayed their own people in exchange for Roman gold. But there is a darker theory. Some scholars suggest that the scroll held Rome's vulnerabilities, weaknesses never meant to be known. Weak fortresses, restless provinces, alliances built on fragile lies. If such knowledge fell into the hands of enemies, Rome's entire empire could collapse like a house of sand. Whatever it was, the spy knew its value. They had not risked death for parchment. They had risked everything for the power to hold Rome hostage with its own secrets. The spy did not flee immediately. That would have been too obvious. Instead, they hid among the chaos their theft had created. Rome was looking outward, toward imagined foreign enemies, when the true enemy was still within its walls. Disguised as a merchant, the spy slipped into markets. As a traveler, they listened to soldiers boasting about their campaigns. At night, they copied fragments of the stolen scroll into smaller parchments, scattering them among caches hidden across the city. Each copy was like a blade pressed to Rome's throat. Soon, whispers spread beyond the capital. Strange movements in the provinces. Generals caught off guard by ambushes. Governors reporting uprisings they had not anticipated. It was as if the barbarians knew Rome's plans before Rome itself did. Historians often point to the Parthian Empire as the most likely beneficiary of the theft. Rome and Parthia had clashed for decades, each vying for dominance over the rich lands of the East. If Parthian spies had acquired the scroll, it would explain the sudden shift in balance that followed. For the first time in generations, Roman legions found themselves outmaneuvered. Armies marched into traps, allies turned hostile, trade routes became dangerous. Rome's aura of invincibility cracked. The empire that had stood unchallenged began to falter. all because of knowledge that should never have left its archives. The Praetorian Guard was relentless. They scoured Rome's underbelly, taverns, brothels, and shadowed alleys. Dozens were arrested, but none confessed to the theft. Senators demanded executions to restore order, and blood flowed, but the scroll remained lost. One name, however, began to circulate in whispers. A figure known only as the Phantom of Rome. No face. No identity. Just a legend among thieves and informants. A master of disguise who could walk into the Curia as a senator and leave as a beggar without anyone noticing. Could this be the same spy? The Senate debated the matter endlessly. Some dismissed the phantom as a myth, an invention of Rome's underworld. Others believed the empire had underestimated a shadow it could never catch. The stolen secret did more than weaken Rome's armies. It weakened Rome's authority. In Gaul, tribes rose up, emboldened by Rome's sudden hesitation. Along the Danube, barbarian chieftains tested the empire's defenses, striking at weak fortresses with uncanny precision. In the east, Parthian envoys spoke with new confidence, as though they knew Rome's hand before the cards were dealt. Even in Rome itself, whispers grew louder. Was the empire cursed? Had the gods abandoned their chosen city? Ordinary citizens, once certain of Rome's eternal strength, began to doubt. And doubt was more dangerous than any sword. The spy who stole Rome's greatest secret did not simply vanish. Their act had changed history. Whether they lived long enough to see the chaos they unleashed is unknown. Some stories claim they escaped to the east, living as a wealthy informant under Parthian protection. Others suggest Rome eventually caught and executed them, erasing their name to conceal the humiliation. But one thing is undeniable. From the moment that scroll left the archives, Rome was never the same. The theft planted a seed of weakness, a reminder that even the mightiest empire could be undone not by armies, but by a single whisper in the dark. As Rome reeled, the hunt for the spy became more desperate. The Praetorian Guard sealed the city, searching every caravan, every dock, every road. Yet the spy seemed always one step ahead, as if mocking the empire itself. And then, silence. The trail went cold. Rome never recovered the scroll. The secret, whatever it was, slipped beyond the empire's grasp forever. And in the centuries that followed, Rome's enemies struck with uncanny knowledge of its weaknesses, as if guided by the ghost of the stolen parchment. Some historians argue that this was the true beginning of Rome's decline. Not the sack of the city centuries later, not the corruption of emperors, but this, a night when one spy stole the invincibility of Rome itself. The theft became a legend, retold across taverns and courts, across empires that rose and fell after Rome. It became a warning to rulers everywhere. The greatest walls cannot stop betrayal. The sharpest swords cannot silence whispers. One man or woman had undone what armies could not. Rome's fall would take centuries, but in that single night, with the theft of a scroll, its future was sealed.
Rome did not collapse in a single night. Empires rarely do. They crack slowly, the fractures spreading silently until the weight of centuries brings them crashing down. And for Rome, many historians argue, the first fracture began not with an invading army, but with a spy. The stolen scroll was more than parchment. 'Twas a dagger to Rome's throat. Knowledge that had once made the empire untouchable was now loose in the world, traded in whispers, sold in shadows, weaponized by Rome's enemies. In the years after the theft, Rome faced setbacks unlike any it had endured before. Legions once known for their precision now marched into traps. Fortresses thought unbreakable fell with terrifying ease. Uprisings spread through the provinces with suspicious coordination. It was as if Rome's enemies could read the empire like an open book. Even within the capital, suspicion poisoned the air. Who had betrayed Rome? Senators accused each other. Generals distrusted their own officers. Ordinary citizens whispered that perhaps the gods themselves had turned against the eternal city. The empire, once bound by unshakable confidence, was unraveling from within. And here's where I'll ask you, if this story is blowing your mind, pause for a second, hit the like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who loves history. Because what comes next shows how one whisper could echo across centuries. The Parthians struck first. They moved swiftly, reclaiming territories Rome had once taken. Their commanders seemed to anticipate Rome's every maneuver, and legions were slaughtered in battles that should have been easy victories. For the first time in generations, Roman generals returned to the capital not in triumph, but in shame. The Germanic tribes soon followed, striking deep into Roman territory. They, too, moved with uncanny precision, hitting weak fortresses, collapsing supply lines, and disappearing before Rome could strike back. Whispers spread that the stolen scroll, or copies of it, had been passed hand to hand, from Parthians to barbarians, from enemies known to enemies unknown. Rome's greatest strength, its control of knowledge, had become its greatest weakness. And what of the spy? Some stories claim they vanished into the east, living under the protection of Parthian kings, rich beyond imagination. Others suggest Rome eventually caught and executed them in secret, burning their body and erasing their name from history to cover the empire's shame. But the silence itself is telling. No records, no trial, no body. Just a shadow that walked into Rome's heart and walked out with its soul. Rome would endure for centuries more. Emperors would rise and fall. Borders would expand and shrink. But never again would Rome carry the same aura of invincibility. The theft had stripped the empire of its illusion of immortality. For every rebellion that followed, every invasion, every civil war, Rome's leaders would ask the same question. Was this the legacy of that night? Was this the cost of the secret we failed to protect? Empires fall not because they are conquered from without, but because they are betrayed from within. Rome, the mightiest empire the world had ever seen, was not undone first by armies, but by a single shadow. A spy who turned information into a weapon sharper than any sword. And in that truth lies a lesson that has echoed across history. Every empire has its scroll, its secret, its weakness. And it takes only one whisper, one betrayal, one spy, to topple it. And that's how one thief in the night began the slow unraveling of Rome. If you loved this dive into forgotten history, hit subscribe right now and turn on notifications, because the next story might just change how you see the past forever.